Hey guys, we're out on the lake today and I'm gonna try and help you break down a lake in this late pre-spawn, spawn and post-spawn fish, how to find a spot to start, where they're gonna be, where they're moving to, and where they're gonna come out to after they've spawned. I've got Lake Fork Bassmaster Elite coming up here next week. We're like mid-April and it's wide open here in the south. There's fish that have spawned, there's fry garters, there's a ton of bass on beds, and there's fish actually moving out into their feeding haunts after they've spawned. So the very first thing that I'm gonna do is go straight to my mapping. I do all of my study before this boat ever hits the water. This is what I'm looking at, and I'm gonna head straight to an area to fish before I've even been on that lake, because I'm gonna look at my mapping and study it and know this is where they're gonna be, this is where they wanna head, this is where they're gonna wanna leave. So the first thing I'm gonna do is put my mapping card into my unit and bring up all of these contours. And as you can see, you've got several different colors right throughout, and I'm gonna utilize all of those colors when it gets later on in the year. But right now, I'm gonna be looking at this red color. This is the shallow water color, is red on Lake Master, and that's gonna be key for late pre-spawn, spawn, and the fish moving out post-spawn, because that's gonna tell me the shallow points where they're gonna wanna move to and where they're gonna come into the big spawning bays and the flats. And so the first thing, I'm gonna hit this side button. I'm gonna go to chart options, and I'm gonna look at my depth highlights here, but I'm gonna look at shallow water. Like all of the other highlights we will talk about later on in the year. Right now, it's all about shallow water. I'm gonna keep it at 10 feet. I feel like in the south, 10 foot is about where they slide up after their wintering spots, or a nice comfortable position where 10 foot is about where it's max, and then goes up to like 6, and then they're gonna push shallow. So when I set it for 10 foot, everything that is 10 feet in this whole lake is gonna be red. And that's gonna start to bring me up some of these big prominent points that lead into these spawning bays. So first up, if it's early pre-spawn, I'm gonna start to look at some of these points that are main lake. The first spot that they're gonna hit, I'm gonna look at those main lake ones, but we're getting late and fish are already spawning. So I'm gonna come inside of these bays and look for the secondary points and the stuff inside of those bays. So here's a prime spot right here. So we've got several spawning coves here where they can move to the back and spawn dead end cuts. We've got 3 or 4 prominent points where those fish can come in off that main lake, set up here, feed, wait for the prime conditions, and then move up into these bays. And so at the back here, we can actually see the deep water is in the middle, but then we've got a good distance of a nice flat, big shallow bay, and then we've got little tiny cuts in it. And so early pre-spawn and late pre-spawn, they're gonna move in and they're gonna set up on these points first before they decide to move back. Then they're gonna move back and they're gonna spawn, set up their beds, and once they've done, they're gonna stay there for a little while into the backs of these cuts and bays and feed, but then they're gonna move back to where they kind of were when they were moving in. So these areas here are great right through the whole spawn, because you're going to have fish coming to them from deep water and from their sort of, you know, their early pre-spawn haunts, and you're going to have fish coming back to them after they've spawned. So these are just great spots to look for right through this entire sort of area of the spawn. And then as that water temperature hits prime time, we're gonna be pushing way back into all of these cuts, in around these docks, dead end coves, and we're gonna be looking for those fish that are locked up on beds. And then as it gets hot and it heats up and the fish get away from that post-spawn, they're moving back out onto those ledges and in those deep water areas. And then we're going to be looking at summertime, and that's when we'll utilize the different colors and different contours for our deep water. But same kind of thing, it's just like this is the shallow water points, drop-offs, and the channels that they're going to actually use. And even in these cuts here, I'm going to look for the most finest detail possible. Like from a distance, you can see there's plenty there to fish. and plenty of differences, but I'm gonna come in like tight on some of these and look for very minute turns. Like right here, we've got a really sharp contour. Like anywhere you've got those contours that are like super bunched up and really hard, that might be a hard channel that they're gonna actually follow or set up on. So from a distance, look at those things from a distance, say that looks like a really good area, and then use your mapping to zoom right in and see the little tiny features. Look for those contours that are bunched up that might make a nice channel for those fish to travel on back into their spawning cove. So that's how I utilize my mapping before I ever hit the water, and follow those fish from pre-spawn to spawn to post-spawn, and maximize your fish catches.